I've always been a stickler for rules. I'm Kevin Johnson, a decorated Army sergeant. The military teaches you discipline, how to balance a demanding job with keeping a stable home life. My little two-bedroom house in the quiet suburb of Oakwood Estates was my sanctuary after my first deployment. It was more than just a house. It was a symbol of stability, something I never really had growing up. We moved around a lot. When I bought that house, it was a commitment to building a life I could be proud of. Oakwood Estates had an active, and let's just say, interesting HOA, led by Mrs. Peterson, this imposing woman in her late 60s who loved enforcing the rules. I mostly kept my head down, attended the mandatory meetings, and followed the rules, even the silly ones about lawn height and mailbox colors. As a soldier, I'm used to following orders, no matter how arbitrary. When I got my deployment orders, I got my affairs in order, just like always. Automated my bills, mortgage, utilities, even my $75 HOA dues. I even wrote to the HOA, letting them know I'd be gone for a while, attaching a copy of my orders. My neighbor, Frank, suggested it. A few weeks before I left, I went to one last HOA meeting. The usual crowd was there: retirees, young families, longtime residents like Frank. Mrs. Peterson ran the meeting with her usual iron fist. The agenda was mostly complaints about flower beds and tree branches. I sat in the back, checking my watch. After the meeting, I told Mrs. Peterson about my deployment. "Mrs. Peterson," I said, "I wanted to let you know I'll be deployed for the next several months. I already sent a letter with my orders, but I wanted to tell you in person." She looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Deployment? For how long?" "About 9 months," I said. "Everything's set up for autopay, so there shouldn't be any issues with my dues. I just wanted to make sure you knew in case anything comes up." Her lips tightened. "Well, I hope you've made arrangements to ensure your property remains in compliance. An unkempt yard reflects poorly on the neighborhood." I nodded, holding back a sigh. "Yes, ma'am. My neighbor, Frank, will be keeping an eye on things." She gave a curt nod. "I'll make a note of it." And that was that. I walked away feeling a little uneasy, but I figured I was just being paranoid. I'd done everything right, and I trusted Frank. The day I left came quickly. I locked up, checked everything, and gave Frank a spare key. "Thanks for helping out," I said. "Let me know if anything comes up." "Don't worry," Frank said. "I'll take care of it. You stay safe." I nodded, got in the cab, and headed to the airport. As the plane took off, I felt a pang of homesickness, but I knew everything back home was in good hands. The first few months of deployment were tough. Remote location, constant tension. Internet was spotty. I checked my bank account whenever I could, and everything looked fine. Bills were being paid, no problems. Then I got an email from Frank. Subject line: "Urgent, HOA notice on your door." He'd attached a picture of a bright orange notice taped to my front door: "Delinquent dues notice. Immediate action required." It said I owed $350 and threatened legal action. My stomach dropped. I knew it was a mistake. My dues were on autopay. I checked my bank account. The payments had been processed every month, no problem. I emailed Frank, asking him to contact the HOA and explain. Days turned into weeks, and I heard nothing back. Frank said he'd called the HOA multiple times, left messages, but nobody returned his calls. Meanwhile, my deployment kept me busy, and I couldn't focus on the problem back home. What I didn't know was that the HOA board had already met about my delinquency. Mrs. Peterson, wielding her HOA bylaws, made me out to be some negligent homeowner. "It's unfortunate," she said, "but we can't make exceptions. Rules are rules. If we let one slide, everyone will want one." When another board member, Alan, pointed out I was deployed, Mrs. Peterson dismissed it. "Irrelevant. You should have made arrangements. We have a community standard to uphold." The board voted to put a lien on my house. The nightmare was just beginning. While I was thousands of miles away, doing my duty, things back home spiraled out of control. The HOA, led by Mrs. Peterson, escalated the situation, even though they knew I was deployed and my dues were paid. They treated my supposed delinquency like a major offense. My absence seemed to give Mrs. Peterson even more reason to flex her power. First, they quietly filed a lien with the county. It was full of legal jargon, saying my property was encumbered due to unpaid dues and penalties. The amount owed was way more than the original $350, now over $1,200 with late fees and interest. Frank saw the lien notice on my door a week later. He tried to intervene, calling the HOA, but they wouldn't talk to him. They said I had to contact them directly. Frank explained I was deployed, but they didn't care. Then Mrs. Peterson called a special board meeting. She addressed the board with a sense of urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "we have a serious matter. A delinquent homeowner is threatening the integrity of this community." Alan cautiously raised his hand. "Are we sure this isn't a mistake? I thought he was in the military, deployed." Mrs. Peterson's lips thinned. "Deployed or not, Mr. Smith is still responsible for following the rules. We can't make exceptions. If he cared about his obligations, he would have made sure this didn't happen. Ignorance is no excuse." "But aren't there protections for deployed service members?" Alan asked. "The Service Members Civil Relief Act? Shouldn't we check?" Mrs. Peterson cut him off. "The SCRA applies to things like mortgages and evictions. This is different. This is about unpaid dues, which are covered by our agreement with the homeowner. We're within our rights to act." Her tone shut down any further discussion. The board voted to move forward with the lien and the next step, foreclosure. The HOA's lawyer, Mr. Harris, handled the foreclosure efficiently. He worked with Mrs. Peterson regularly and knew not to question her. He prepared the paperwork, making everything look legal, even if it wasn't morally right. Notices were mailed to my empty house, even though they knew I wasn't there. The unanswered notices gave them the excuse they needed to proceed. My house was listed for auction ridiculously fast. The minimum bid was set at $2,500, way below its $200,000 value, supposedly to cover the dues and legal costs. The HOA didn't care about getting a fair price. The auction was a quiet affair at the county courthouse. A few bidders, mostly investors looking for a deal. A real estate developer, Mr. Thompson, a friend of Mrs. Peterson, bid the minimum $2,500 and won, with no competition. Mrs. Peterson watched with satisfaction. To her, this was a win for the HOA. I was made an example of. She thought it would scare other homeowners into line. She felt no guilt, dismissing my deployment as irrelevant. "Rules are rules," she muttered. Back in Oakwood Estates, Frank was getting worried. He saw strangers at my house, cleaning crews and contractors sent by Mr. Thompson. He tried calling me again. When I finally got his emails weeks later, I was stunned. "What do you mean my house was sold?" I wrote back. "That's impossible." Frank explained everything, sending photos of the notices and the auction listing. I was devastated. I'd done everything right. Set up autopay, notified the HOA, asked Frank to watch my house. How could this happen? Then my frustration turned to anger. I researched the SCRA. It specifically protects deployed military personnel from foreclosure without a court order. The HOA had broken federal law. The sale of my house was illegal. I vowed to fight back, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. Thousands of miles from home, with limited resources and time, it was an uphill battle. But I wouldn't accept this. For now, I had to focus on my mission and prepare for the fight when I got home. After months of deployment, I finally got my orders to return home. I was so relieved. I was exhausted, physically and mentally. All I could think about was getting back to my house, sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee, catching up with Frank, sleeping in my own bed. When the cab pulled up to my street, something felt off. My house looked different. The lawn was mowed, but not how I or Frank would have done it. The flower beds were rearranged. At first, I thought Frank had just been extra thorough, but as we got closer, I saw a strange SUV in my driveway. The porch light was on. Someone was inside my house. I got out of the cab, my heart pounding, and walked up to the front door. It swung open, and a man in his 30s came out, carrying a toolbox. He stopped when he saw me. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I think there's been a mistake," I said, trying to stay calm. "This is my house." He frowned. "I don't know what you're talking about. I bought this house at auction a few months ago." "Who are you?" My mind raced. "I'm Sergeant Kevin Johnson. I've owned this house for years. I've been deployed overseas. I never sold it." He shook his head. "Look, I don't know what to tell you. I bought this place fair and square." He pulled a folder from the box and handed me a copy of the deed. My stomach dropped. Thompson Properties, LLC. The sale date was 3 months earlier. A woman appeared in the doorway. "What's going on, honey?" she asked, looking at us. The man pointed at me. "He says this is his house." The woman's face hardened. "I think you need to leave. This is our property now." I felt a surge of anger, but arguing wouldn't help. "I don't know what's going on here," I said, "but I'm not leaving until I figure it out." The man sighed and pulled out his phone. "Fine. Call the cops. We're not doing anything illegal. We bought this house legally." I clenched my fists, took a step back, and pulled out my phone to call Frank. When Frank answered, he sounded relieved. "Kevin, thank God you're back. I've been trying to reach you. Did you see my emails?" "I did," I said, "but I didn't think it was this bad. Someone else is living in my house, Frank. They're saying they bought it at auction." Frank sighed. "I was afraid of this. Look, the HOA sold your house while you were gone. They claimed you were delinquent on your dues, but I know that's not true. I tried to fight it, but they wouldn't listen. I'm so sorry, Kevin. I felt betrayed. I'd suspected the HOA, but hearing it confirmed made me furious. How could this happen? I paid my dues. Everything was on auto pay." "I don't know," Frank admitted, "but I kept all the notices they sent. I'll bring them over. Where are you staying?" I realized I had nowhere to go. "I'll figure something out," I said. "Just bring everything you have." We met later that evening at a motel. Frank brought a stack of papers, his face grim. "I've been keeping track of everything since you left," he said. "The HOA started sending notices about unpaid dues a couple of months after you deployed. I tried calling them, but they wouldn't talk to me because I wasn't the owner. Then I saw the foreclosure notice. I flipped through the papers, getting angrier with each page. Legal jargon, threats, a letter from the HOA's lawyer about the delinquency, and the auction date. The timeline was clear. Every notice sent while I was deployed, even though they knew. They knew I was overseas. I said, my voice shaking. I sent them my deployment orders. They had no right." Frank nodded. "I know. And there's something else. The guy who bought your house, Thompson Properties, he's a friend of Mrs. Peterson's. I think this was all planned. I thought about Mrs. Peterson. I'd trusted her, and she'd stabbed me in the back. This isn't over," I said. "I'm going to fight this." "You're not alone," Frank said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "I'll help any way I can." I spent the next few days gathering evidence and contacting a lawyer. The SCRA protects deployed military personnel from foreclosure without a court order. The HOA had broken federal law, and I would make them pay. As I put the pieces together, I realized how badly I'd been screwed. The HOA hadn't just ignored my rights. They'd actively conspired to sell my house for pennies on the dollar. The betrayal hurt, but it also made me more determined. I had to take the fight to the HOA and expose them. With Frank's support and a lawyer's help, I prepared for battle. It would test my resolve, but I was ready. This was my home, and I wasn't letting it go. I'd faced battles before, but this one was different. Courtrooms and paperwork, not life or death decisions. But it was just as important. My home was my anchor, the one stable thing in my life. The HOA had taken that away, and I would hold them accountable. My first step was suing Oakwood Estates HOA and Thompson Properties. My lawyer, Sarah Whitmore, cited the SCRA. The case got media attention. Local news loved the story of a soldier coming home to find his house sold. Sarah worked tirelessly. She dug into the HOA's practices and found a pattern of aggressive foreclosures and questionable sales. My situation wasn't unique. The first court hearing was tense. Mrs. Peterson, all composure, arrived with the HOA's lawyer, Mr. Harris. Mr. Thompson sat there smugly. I, on the other hand, was quietly determined. My uniform gave me a certain presence. Sarah presented evidence of my deployment, including the letter I'd sent the HOA. She pointed out how they'd ignored the SCRA. "The law is clear," she stated. "The foreclosure of Sergeant Johnson's home without a court order was illegal. The HOA violated federal protections for deployed service members. The defense argued that my delinquency justified their actions. Mrs. Peterson testified, claiming she had no choice but to enforce the rules. Our community depends on everyone adhering to the rules," she said coldly. "Exceptions can't be made, even for military personnel. It's a matter of fairness." Sarah wasn't buying it. "Fairness?" she countered. "How is it fair to sell a $200,000 home for $2,500 without giving the homeowner a chance to defend himself? How is it fair to ignore federal laws designed to protect the very people who serve this country?" The courtroom was silent. Mrs. Peterson shifted uncomfortably. Sarah then focused on Thompson Properties, presenting evidence linking Mr. Thompson to Mrs. Peterson, including emails that suggested the sale was prearranged. One email stood out. "The Johnson property will be available soon. I'll make sure it's listed at the minimum bid for you." As the trial went on, public support grew. Veterans groups rallied behind me, offering legal help and sharing my story. The pressure on the HOA and Thompson Properties mounted. Residents demanded answers. The turning point came when Frank testified. He described trying to contact the HOA on my behalf and their dismissive responses. They knew Kevin was deployed, he said, his voice emotional. They didn't care. They saw a chance to take his house, and they took it. The HOA's lawyer tried to discredit Frank, but Sarah shut him down, bringing the focus back to the facts. In her closing argument, Sarah was powerful. This case isn't just about one man's house, she said. It's about abuse of power and betrayal of trust. Sergeant Johnson was serving his country while the HOA and Thompson Properties conspired to steal his home. They thought he wouldn't fight back. Today, we're here to prove them wrong. The jury deliberated for hours. Finally, the verdict, in my favor. The sale was declared invalid. Thompson Properties had to return my house. The HOA was fined heavily for violating the SCRA, and Mrs. Peterson was forced to resign. I was so relieved, but the fight wasn't over. Restoring my house would take time. The new occupants had made changes, but the victory felt amazing. It wasn't just for me, it was for all service members who'd faced similar injustices. In the following weeks, I became a local hero. My story sparked discussions about HOA abuses and the need to protect homeowners, especially those in the military. Veterans groups used my case to push for legislative reforms. One evening, standing on my porch, watching the sunset, I felt grateful. The fight had been hard, but I'd won back what was mine. My home, my sanctuary, was finally mine again. The scars of the experience would remain, but so would the lessons learned and the connections forged in the fight for justice.